Hello, Minnesota. Welcome back to the Tony Hernandez Show. I'm your host, Tony Hernandez. It is finally spring, or at least it's feeling like spring out there. If you've been driving around, you've been noticing the potholes and the ice, and there's been a lot of tragic car accidents in Minnesota. A lot of good young people have passed on lately on the highways, so I urge all of you who are traveling out there, especially as it gets a little cooler at night, just drive slow. You never know where that ice is going to pop out of nowhere, and we just want you all to get to where you're going safely. We have a great show today. We have the Minnesota Secretary of State candidate running for the Republican endorsement. His name is Dennis Nguyen. I saw him speak today at the SD 51 convention out in Eagan, and he's a great speaker. He's got a great story, and with that, we'll welcome Dennis to the show. Dennis Nguyen. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I was really impressed with the speech. I thought, in my opinion, that you gave the best speech by far at the SD 51 convention, and you have a compelling story as well about your immigration to America with your family, and I just want you to share that story a little more with the viewers, if that's okay.
Yeah, I was born in Vietnam, and born to military officer in the Air Force, South Vietnamese Air Force. My dad, of course, my mother, and I have an older brother, 2 younger sisters. And as you all know, when 1975 came, South Vietnam fell, and we were on. I remember playing in the front yard of our home in Saigon, and my dad came back. He was in the Vietnamese Air Force. Came back under U.S. military police escort. And you get goosebumps thinking about it. And he says,
how old were you?
5 years old.
5 years old, okay.
And he says, get on. Everyone got on. And we literally left Vietnam with the clothes on our backs. Because at that time, it was April 28th, and Saigon fell on April 30th, 1975. And you could just hear the bombs, according to him. Of course, I was too young, but blowing up in the outskirts of Saigon. And so we left, and we were probably one of the first, 10,000 Vietnamese to set foot on U.S. soil in May 5th, 1975.
Wow, can you talk a little more about that? So your father tells you to pack your bags and you're moving to America.
Right.
You're 5 years old. You obviously have some memories of that time.
Yep.
What's going on in your young mind at that point when your father's telling you you're leaving your home country?
Right. So you don't remember too much when you're that young, except for crazy material things, right? And this was a crazy material thing. And I just remember like it was yesterday. We all jumped on the Jeep, went to the Air Force Base, which is the main airport there, of course, spent the night at the U.S. Air Force Base, and then on the next morning, we were probably boarding one of the last C-130s, that's a military transport plane, by the way, out of Saigon. So we flew from Saigon to Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines, to Guam, to Hawaii, and then to California, where I ended up, all in a matter of 7 days.
And so the days leading up to your departure from Vietnam, were you mature enough to know what was going on, or did you have any fear?
No, not at all. So I didn't know. I don't remember anything before that. Of course, with some intermittent stuff, but that day I remember. Yeah.
And so you ended up in Anaheim, California.
Yep.
And what were your first memories of living in California in America?
So, my family is very interesting. We learned English literally on American TV. So my favorite TV shows back then, when I was a kid, was the Brady Bunch, of course. And my mother fell in love with Three's Companies. If you remember, if you're old enough to remember that sitcom.
Was that the one with, let me knock on your door?
That's right, that's right. And if you remember the 3 main characters of that, it was Jack, Suzanne, and Chrissy. Now, Chrissy's real name is Suzanne Summers. So, of course, my mom named my older brother Jack, my 2 younger sisters Janet and Suzanne. Now, of course, I got named after one of the members of the Beach Boys, because my dad really liked the Beach Boys music.
So is that common then when Asian immigrants come to America is to take on a new English type name, or?
I wouldn't say it's common or not common. I see that. For us, it was just funny because of the circumstance of how we acquired our English names. I always tell that people get a joke out of it, get a laugh out of it.
So a lot of people come to this country. Some people come for various reasons. You were escaping war, a very dangerous situation. How were you able as a young boy to adapt to the American lifestyle, and can you contrast that to how your parents adapted? Was it one of the same or was it different?
So I think it was much harder for my parents. You know, my dad was a military officer in a war country, which meant he had a lot of privileges and that sort of thing. I think coming here was difficult for him because he went from a notch in this part of society to down to here. And you know, I remember growing up from the ages of 5 to 18. I hardly ever saw my dad. And the reason why is he worked his tail off. He was a carpenter, he was a grocery store clerk, and he was a gas station attendant. And you know, it was tough. It was tough. And
so he's working these jobs simultaneously?
Simultaneously.
So how many hours a day? He's working 20 hours a day?
I think he's working a lot. I mean, I just never saw him. And you know, my mother, of course, didn't speak a word of English when she was here, first came here at the age of 29.
A lot harder to learn English when you're in your elder age.
Right. And you know, if you can't speak English in this country, you're at a tremendous disadvantage on a daily basis. So I think she recognized that, and she eventually put herself through community college, learned English, and acquired a skill. She became a technician and got a job at Hughes Aircraft, which then was the military equipment manufacturer. So I think for them it was much more difficult than us children. I had a great childhood. I loved every second of my childhood. What's wrong with growing up 3 miles away from Disneyland, right?
So did you have, was there a strong Vietnamese community in where you were living?
So I grew up in Orange County, which is amalgam of many different cities, Anaheim being one of them. Anaheim tends to be more Mexican. And you know, my high school graduating class was roughly 75% Mexican. Now, in the neighboring cities away from Anaheim is Westminster and Garden Grove, and that's more Vietnamese, much more Vietnamese.
And so you talked about the diversity, mainly Hispanic Americans that you went to school with. So you take it you grew a taste for Mexican food.
Yeah. I always laugh at people. I ate my first burrito before I went to eat my first Chinese meal at a Chinese restaurant.
That's good. That's good. So how did you like school?
Loved it. Loved everything about school. You know, I think it was innate within me to do well in school. You know, I enrolled in advanced placement classes in high school. Really studied. I really took it seriously. Was there in chief of my high school newspaper. You know, played sports, played football, basketball, and baseball. Really was active, and then just enjoyed high school, junior high, grade school. Yeah, it was just a great time.
Yeah, so Dallas, if we can pop up Dennis's website here, just so people, our viewers, can go there and learn more about your campaign, and if they wanted to help you out, they certainly could do so. It's win with your last name, Win. It's pronounced Win. It's spelled Nguyen. It looks like there's some videos up there and some good stuff to learn more. You got a Merry Christmas video from your family. That's nice. And I was reading a little more about your About section, though. And so you have quite an educational background and experience. And can you talk about the variety of different schools you went to and degrees that you earned?
So you know, when you're a little kid, you're just intellectually interested in different things, right? And that's how it was with me. So when I was an 18-year-old kid, I kind of thought, you know, this China thing is going to be huge. It's going to change the history of the world. And so, of course, I took Chinese literature at the University of California, Irvine. And then also, I was always interested in economics. You know, it does drive the world at the end of the day, and it drives people. You know, I'm a big believer in incentives. What drives people? And generally speaking, you know, monetary incentives drives people, and so economics is a study of that. So I studied economics and Chinese literature at the University of California, Irvine. Got 2 bachelor's degrees there, and then after that, I thought, you know, I want to study the world. What drives nations to act in a way that they do? And so I got a MA in International Relations from Johns Hopkins University in Washington, D.C. And then also I was like, when you're a working class kid, thing about working class parents is that they want their kids to be wealthy when they're older.
Yeah.
Especially immigrant parents, because you're going to take care of me when you're older. And so my parents were like, well, what's good? You be a doctor or a lawyer. Yeah. And of course, Dennis is probably one of the very few Asian guys in America that's bad at science. So medical school, of course, is out the door. But no, I studied, and then I got a law degree at the University of Minnesota Law School, and that's my entree into the state of Minnesota. And then finally, I got an MBA from the University of Chicago, and it's finance and business was always something very interesting to me.
Yeah, that's a good point that you brought up, and I've had this discussion with other people in terms of young people appreciating the educational opportunities that they have, and some of the discussions I've had, we've noticed a trend that sometimes the most well-to-do American families, talking upper middle class, upper class families, they oftentimes have the resources to send their kids to the best grade schools, high schools,
right.
And universities, and oftentimes their children will not perform as well because maybe they don't appreciate what they have. And then on the contrast, you see a lot of Asian American immigrants come to this country, and they keep their head down, and they bear down on their
right.
studies, and,
right.
and they really they work. Do you still see that in the new generation of immigrants that are coming to America? Can you comment on that?
I do see whether it's Asian, Hispanic, African, European. I think the people, what makes this country so great is that it gives us so many opportunities. And I'm a big believer that education levels the playing field. So that's what's wonderful about the United States of America, is that it allows people to come in, we educate them, we have I think it's still a very good public school system. It definitely can be improved, but it's at its basic core, very good. And of course our university system really is second to none. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's probably true what you said, Tony.
Okay, well, we're going to take a look at your website again. Again, your website is win-with-your last name, Nguyen, Nguyen. And I want to play one of these videos that you have here. Do you have a preference? Which one?
Anything you want.
Let's line up this one then. Dennis Nguyen in Only an American Story.
When I called my mom to tell her I was running for Secretary of State, she said, "Only in America, son." And when I thought about it, I realized how right she was. In fact, my whole life has been an Only in America story, just like the millions of other immigrants, past and present, who have made America their home. My family fled Vietnam in 1975, 2 days before the fall of Saigon. I am an adopted son of America and have been welcomed into the family with the open arms of Lady Liberty. I grew up like any other average American kid, playing sports, going to school, working summer jobs, and dreaming about the future. My family valued education above all else, and because of hard work, I was able to win scholarships to some of America's best universities. After completing my education, I joined the business world and was fortunate enough to achieve professional success. Being a successful entrepreneur has been extremely rewarding, but now it's time for me to give back to our great state and time for the next chapter in my Only in America story. I decided to seek the office of Minnesota Secretary of State because I believe I can contribute in a significant way. There are two main duties: elections and business registration. I would strive to ensure our election system is the best in the nation, work hard to increase voter registration, and protect your voting rights. Our democratic right to vote is sacred, and given my personal background, I fully understand the need to make voting fair and accessible for all of our citizens. On the business side, I will use my experience to create a business hub to help hardworking families and entrepreneurs connect with the best resources available. In other words, I will make the Secretary of State's office the one-stop shop for business creation and capital formation in the state of Minnesota. I will unlock the potential of this office to do my part to get Minnesota's economy moving. If I did not believe I could bring a new and valuable perspective to this race because of my unique background, I would not be running. It's time for someone new to step into the arena, someone other than a career politician with the same old answers and partisan rhetoric. We are so lucky in this country to have the freedoms and opportunities that exist here, and I know this from personal experience. And I humbly ask for your trust and your vote to be the next Minnesota Secretary of State and to prove my mother right, only in America.
All right, so that's a nice little video you have on your website. I really appreciate when candidates have these types of videos out there, because I think it's a great way for people to quickly get to know candidates when they're browsing the web or whatever. So I applaud you for having that out. It was really nicely done as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I noticed was that your office that's in the background? That you have that picture of President Abraham Lincoln there? Where did you get that picture from?
That's actually my. It's actually the office in my house actually. So I have all the stuff I have there, I've just accumulated over many years.
Nice. And where do you live again?
I live on the Lake of the Isles in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Great.
Yep.
Great. So I wanted to talk a little more now about the endorsement process, because you're running for the Minnesota Secretary of State, and you're also seeking the endorsement from the Republican Party. As of right now, there are no other candidates running, so you are the only candidate running for that position.
That is correct.
And do you think anyone else is going to get into the race?
I do not think so, but you know, it's a competitive process, and you know, we enjoy competition.
And when is the last time that we've had a Republican Secretary of State in Minnesota?
Mary Kiffmeyer, current state senator Mary Kiffmeyer, was Secretary of State from 1999 to 2007. So
she was up until when Mark Ritchie took over, won election in 2006 and was sworn in?
Correct.
Got it. And how has the endorsement process been going so far? Have you been traveling around the state? I saw you at the convention today. I take it you're going to dozens and dozens of these conventions. And what's the reception like? What are people saying?
I think we're receiving a wonderful reception. People are, how would I say it? People are, it's fresh ideas. The way we're approaching it from a non-traditional Republican stance. Because at the end of the day, I think if we are to win in November, I think we're going to have to approach it from that vantage point. And I feel a lot of reception, wonderful reception to us.
One of the stereotypes of the Republican Party is that it's the party of the rich white guy. And do you see that stereotype is true as you go throughout to these different conventions, or do you see a diverse Republican Party?
I think the party itself is more diverse than the activists. I think the activists in these BPOUs, generally speaking, is more European heritage. But you know, we're drawing people in. We're bringing in my candidacy, I've been to over 25 events in minority communities throughout the state. We've been endorsed by a swath of Hispanic, East African, Vietnamese, Chinese, and Hmong community leaders. We feel good about where we're at vis-a-vis the general election in November 2014.
And you said you have quite a nice role of legislators, current legislators who have endorsed you. Can you let us know a few of who these major endorsements are?
So we've been endorsed by over 70% of the Republican state legislators. We feel good with where we're at, but you know, our campaign chair, of course, is former Minnesota House Speaker Steve Swigum. My finance chair is former state party chair Ron Ebensteiner. In terms of the more prominent state legislators, everyone's prominent, by the way. Mr. Hernandez just asked me to name a few, so everyone's prominent. But you know, Senator David Senjum, very close to him. Senator Roger Chamberlain. Very good friends with him, and Senator Eric Pratt, Senator Jeremy Miller, Senator Brendan Peterson, who's my campaign chair manager, by the way, in the House of Representatives, Representatives Steve Drazkowski, and so on and so forth. But they're all wonderful people.
Yeah, that's quite a list of support that you have there so far. So congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
And wish you the best for the continued. When is so you have to get endorsed at the state convention?
Correct.
And when is the state convention?
The state convention is the last weekend of May.
Last weekend of May, and then that's also where the Minnesota governor candidate is going to be endorsed.
Right.
U.S. Senate candidate.
Correct.
Attorney General. Is there a Republican running for Attorney General right now?
As of right now, there is not.
And then there's a number of governor's candidates that are running. We've had many of them on the show, like Marty Seifert has been on, Jeff Johnson has been on, State Senator Dave Thompson has been on, Rob Farnsworth has also been on the show. It's been really interesting to get to know them more and to find out what the differences are between all of them. I do know with the statewide elections that the Secretary of State candidate is to a certain degree tied to the governor's candidate, or do you think, is it possible that you can win the Secretary of State and then we may not win the governor's seat? How does that work?
Well, historically, if you look at where we've at the last few election cycles, there is historical precedent where the gubernatorial and the Secretary of State candidates diverge. For example, in 1998, Mary Kiffmeyer won, but our Republican gubernatorial candidate lost. In 2006, Mark Ritchie won, yet Tim Pawlenty won re-election. So there are historical precedents. Quite frankly, I think the two races are highly correlated, meaning that whoever is the Republican candidate for new governor will have a huge bearing on where the race is going to go. And quite frankly, it's the macro trends, whether or not people think Mark Dayton should be reelected. That's going to have a huge core decision on where my race goes.
And are you partnering up with any of the governor's candidates? Do you have a favorite out of any of them, or do you think that any of them would be, best suited to win against Dayton?
So you're going to get me in trouble with that last question. I think all of our gubernatorial candidates are wonderful. And whoever is chosen and is nominated by the party at the end of the day will be someone I will be proud to run with.
Okay, because a number of them have said that they are seeking the endorsement, yet if they don't get it, that they're going to continue to run in the primary, and that probably may pose a challenge for your candidacy. So are you saying that whoever the delegates endorse at the state convention, that's the person that you're going to be supporting up until the primary at least, and then whoever wins the primary go after that? Or?
I will be proud to serve whoever the nominee of the Republican Party is. That, I think, and the nominee of the Republican Party will be defined as whoever wins the August primary.
And one of the things that came out in the news, and I'm sure you've heard this question over and over again, is about what Aaron Rupar of the City Pages wrote about. He said that at some point you visited a strip club. I was just wondering if you wanted to address that story right now.
Yeah, I think that's been already addressed by our campaign manager. I think there's a couple of inaccuracies in that story.
What in particular?
First, that I frequent gentlemen's clubs. That's wholly inaccurate. What I think he's calling in question is a night where, quite frankly, we've already discussed that. So that's inaccurate. And the other part of that story, of course, is the fact that I'm pro-choice. I think I'm a very socially inclusive individual, believer in a big tent party, and so personally I'm anti-abortion. But I think matters such as that, matters of choice, and matters of morality really should be left out of the government sphere. And quite frankly, at the end of the day, it's shouldn't be the government's business to determine those issues. So that's my view.
And so the Secretary of State doesn't really have a whole lot to do with social issues anyways, right?
That's absolutely correct.
What are the primary responsibilities of the Secretary of State? Like, what do they actually do?
Well, the Secretary of State that really does. There's a number of things the Secretary of State does, but there's two things that we deal with. One is, of course, business registrations, business services. That's over 2/3 of the workload of the office. And so,
so business services, like what in particular?
So let's say you're an entrepreneur. You've decided to come up with a wonderful gadget.
We need more entrepreneurs in Minnesota,
and we sure do. We sure do.
We have a great history of entrepreneurialism in Minnesota. It's dying off, though.
Right, and so I think with things like that, you come up with a gadget. You're an entrepreneur, and you think the gadget's going to change the world, as most entrepreneurs think. And well, the first thing you're going to have to do to get in a formalized way into entering the economy is through us, which is you got to do organize yourself as either an LLC, S corp, whatever the case may be, LLP, and you're going to have to fill out some paperwork. Our paperwork from the Secretary of State's office, and then you're going to have to come up with the name of your organization. And so you fill all that out, you submit it. Within 1 to 2 weeks, you get back your paperwork, and you're formalized now. So that's really the main focus right now of where the Secretary of State's office is. I like to expand on that. Instead of just being merely a filing cabinet for business registrations, if we really believe that last year, 48% of all jobs in this country were created by companies with 50 employees or less. Wouldn't it make sense to enable the entrepreneur to get his or her business up and running, not within 5 years, but hopefully within 6 to 12 months? And so what I'd like to do is, since we are the gatekeeper, really, of that entrepreneur entering the economy, I'd like to talk about how to, well, let's create an ecosystem where, and I call it the one-stop shop for job creation and capital formation in the state of Minnesota. It's really an ecosystem where the entrepreneur can liaise with lawyers, accountants, bankers, investors, investment bankers, consultants, industry associations, to get their businesses up and running. That's what I do in my daily business, and I'd like to take that and help that with the entrepreneurs in the Secretary of State's office.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it takes 1 to 2 weeks, you say, to get a legal business up and running in Minnesota?
To get your certificate organization after you've submitted the paperwork.
Okay, and how does that rank with the rest of the states in the U.S.? Is that faster or slower?
It's pretty much in line.
And what about other countries in the world?
Actually, pretty quick. But Hong Kong is a couple of days, so that's very quick. But other countries, what I've heard, it takes a month or even 2 months. So we're pretty good.
And going back to what we were talking about, we've talked on this show many times about the rich history of entrepreneurial activities in Minnesota. We have great companies that have sown their seeds and grown: Target, Best Buy, Dairy Queen, Honeywell, West Publishing. You could go on and on about the great companies that come out of Minnesota in the past. Now, if you look at the statistics, Minnesota actually is at the bottom of the list compared to the rest of the country in terms of new businesses, startups.
Right.
Can you expand a little more, because this is an issue I really am passionate about. How can we get more startups, more people that want to take that initial risk to start a business?
So, I come from the private equity world, venture capital private equity world, and really business formation, capital formation, really starts at a very elementary level, and it's this. You have an idea for a particular product or service, okay? You're going to need someone or a group of someones to finance that. Now, whether that's debt, which could be, in the case would be a loan of some sort, or a bond, or whatever it is, or equity. You're going to need that to be, that particular product or service to be financed. And so what we'd like to do how I envision this is really, once the entrepreneur gets his certificate or her certificate of incorporation, then organization in this case would be, then we have this ecosystem where it's part of the website, it's part of the office, where they could go in and say, well, here's X lawyers that could help you with this. And let's say you're starting up some sort of gadget X, and here's the industry X. And so you could go and this lawyer will help you, this accountant will help you, or this consultant will help you, and here's some credit, some microfinance credit, or here's some angels that would be potentially interested in your deal. And so we could even link you with the Minnesota Venture Capital Association, or we could link you with Minnesota. There's a Angel Gopher Fund. These are things that we could really work together with. You know, the University of Minnesota, by the way, there's a lot of technology that's been developed every day with researchers, scientists. Gosh, we could find a way for those individuals to really bring that and commercialize that technology. We could totally work with the University of Minnesota on that. These are the certain things that I have in my head percolating that really could help with job creation and capital formation.
Nice. Well, I like those ideas. And, you know, Mark Ritchie announced that he's not going to seek re-election. There are no term limits for a Secretary of State, so he could have kept on going, and he decided to step down. And I wanted to know, as somebody who's aspiring to take over that seat, can you give a couple things that, or let the audience know a couple things that Mark Ritchie did that you thought were good or positive?
I think, you know, I sit on the board of the Minnesota Historical Society with Mark Ritchie. He is a very personable man. I kind of like him. You know, I know a lot of people in my party dislike him, but I kind of like Mark Ritchie, Secretary Ritchie. I find him to be an intelligent, thoughtful, well-spoken individual. Now, obviously, we have our differences in politics. He comes from a view of the world that's different from mine. You know, in terms of issues that I would differentiate with him on is, of course, him unilaterally implementing online registration. You know, there's a lawsuit going on right now.
Can you expand with the online registration of voting you're talking about?
Correct.
And what is the procedure that he wants to put in place, or is it already in place?
Well, it's already in place now. So, you know, basically you can register online instead of going through, you know, offline.
And you're opposed to this?
I'm actually in favor of online registration. I think it's a wonderful tool to get, you know, my campaign is all about, we want to increase elections access to people who can vote legitimately. And so any tool that accomplishes that is something I would be in favor of. Now, regarding what Secretary Ritchie has done, he's unilaterally imposed that. Now, the DFL governor of the state is on record of saying any changes to elections law needs to be done in a bipartisan manner. And so what I would have done is instead of unilaterally implementing such a system, I would have had public hearings. I would have gone through the state Senate, gone through the state House, had it vetted by state senators and state representatives, passed by a state legislature, and then signed to the law by the governor, and then implement it. Because we got to realize that the Secretary of State's office is not a law-making body. We're a administrative body. We execute the will and the law of the legislature signed into law by the governor.
So are you saying that Mark Ritchie stepped out of his bounds or was outside of even his legal capacity for doing what he did?
Oh, I definitely believe that. And we are, the courts are hearing this case now, and we'll find out very soon whether the court agrees with our position.
So a little more about registering online. So if you go to the website, you put in your information, how does that registration process ID that particular voter? What sort of information do they use for that?
Well, you know, a state law now, you just got to require, you know, that you're a citizen. So you're going to have to sign something saying that you're a citizen. You gotta prove where you live. Generally, you provide a utility bill, and with that, proves who you are, and you could register. Online registration will mimic what's offline.
So a lot of people, and they tend to be more on the conservative side, and Republicans make the claim that voter fraud is a big issue here in Minnesota. They cite some recent convictions that occurred in the state and those numbers. In your opinion, Dennis, Do you think that voter fraud is a problem in Minnesota? And if so, what will you do about it if you're elected?
Sure. It depends on how you define the problem. What is the problem? But yeah, sure, I think there's, and I don't think the Democrats disagree with this, is that there is definitely voting irregularities in the system. I think that's a, that's something that we don't have to argue about. What I would do, of course, is I'd like to implement the law of the land, actually, and really ensure whoever votes legitimately. What does that mean? You got to prove who you are. You got to prove where you live.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way to really get the voter fraud out of it. Now, there's many ways of getting to that. What we tried to do, what the Republican Party tried to do in 2012, of course, was pass this voter ID amendment.
Mm-hmm.
That the voters of the state of Minnesota have already spoken on that, and anyone that's followed my campaign will know that that is not a part of my campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going to do is we're going to work with Democrats, Republicans in a bipartisan manner to enforce the current laws on the books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there was that radio commercial. I believe it was a powerful one before the general election. It was Governor Dayton and former Governor Arne Carlson, I believe it was, and they teamed up stating that the voter ID amendment was unfair and basically we should push the issue back to the legislator. And I believe I remember Governor Dayton saying that, there are some things that potentially could be done to address this specific issue. So we'll have to see if any of that actually occurs. But in terms of vouching, do you believe in the vouching process?
No, I don't.
So is that something that you could unilaterally get rid of, or is that something that needs to pass through the state legislator?
Well,
and can you just tell everyone what vouching is?
So vouching is basically same day registration. So the law of the state is that up to 45 days prior to the election, you can register to vote. What does that mean? Like I said, fill out a form, sign a statement that you're a citizen, and you provide a utility bill, that sort of thing, and prove where you live. So from 45 days to the day you vote, you can't register offline anymore.
Okay.
What you can do, of course, is you could go on the day of voting,
Mm-hmm.
have someone vouch that, in fact, who you are, where you live, and you can vote.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of problems with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely am against that.
Because you can actually vouch for, can't you vouch for up to 15 people or 13 people?
Yeah.
And there are people, in fact, that do that
Right, of course.
on a regular basis. We're not saying that they're committing fraud by no means, but voting judges and people who sit at the voting booths will say that there'll be a busload of people that come in, and there'll be one person that vouches for a dozen people to go in and vote.
Right. And then just, obviously we're Minnesota nice in this state, and we're trying to trust the people around, but at the end of the day, it's the real world, and I think that's just a technique that's filled with potential issues. So if I was Secretary of State, I would propose to have that eliminated from how we register in the state, and so I would push something through the legislature to get that eliminated.
That's good to hear. So going back, you're seeking the Republican endorsement.
I am.
And are all your family members, are they in Minnesota? Are they still in California? Or where does your family fall into?
So my family is out there. They're all in Southern California. I'm not enjoying the amazing weather up here in Minnesota, of course. But no, they're generally all Republican. I am a proud member of the Republican Party.
So you can say that you've basically been a Republican then your entire life?
I've been a Republican since I was age 10.
Wow.
I remember
That's pretty amazing. What was it about the Republican Party that attracted a young Vietnamese American immigrant?
Well, I remember in October 1980, the Carter-Reagan debate, and at that time, then Governor Reagan looked at President Carter and said, "There you go again." When he said that, I was like, I'm gonna be a Republican. This guy's a cool guy.
Ever since you were there, huh? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And how about can you talk about some Republican leaders that you idolized as a younger person?
Oh, of course, President Reagan. I think he's the.
So you were how old in the 80s then? You were in
80, I was 10 to 88 when he was president, so 10 to 18.
Okay.
Basically my formative years. You know, he's a wonderful standard bearer for our Republican Party and our conservative values, really. So he's definitely someone I of course, us being the party of Lincoln, we got to look back to where Abraham Lincoln is all about. You know, I think those two presidents stand out.
How about in your opinion, great American, or I should say Minnesotan Republicans? Do you have any that you look up to, either that are serving in office right now or have in the past?
I think Governor Tim Pawlenty is an outstanding public servant. Senator Rudy Boschwitz has been an amazing individual. He continues to be an amazing contributor to society. Governor Al Quie, of course, I attended his 90th birthday party, a couple months ago. Those are three names I would think, and you know, I've been fortunate enough to be surrounded by some really prominent Republicans in this campaign, as mentioned earlier. Former House Speaker Steve Swigum is our campaign chair, and really blessed to have him on the team. And you know, my mentor here in the state of Minnesota, former Republican Party Chair Ron Ebensteiner, is my finance chair. I seek a lot of counsel from him, and you know, and of course the senators I've already talked about: David Senjum, Jeremy Miller, Brandon Peterson, Eric Pratt, to name a few, and of course Steve Droskowski and Jennifer Loon and Cindy Pugh, and you know, in the House, just wonderful public servants.
And how do you reconcile? You know, you said when you were 10 years old, you were Republican. You knew you were Republican then. Is that the same case with Asian Americans, Vietnamese Americans, Chinese Americans that are living here in Minnesota? Do they have that natural inclination to be attracted to the Republican Party, to the conservative cause?
Yeah, let me backtrack on that because you know, I'm a non-political person actually. Yes, I said I was Republican since I was 10. I have conservative tendencies, and what does that mean? That's really economic and social opportunity, personal responsibility, fiscal responsibility. These are conservative values that I hold dear to my heart. Faith in a creator, faith in community values. These are things that I think all conservatives believe in. Now, does that mean that people that hold those views are Republican? Not necessarily. I think you could have those views and quite frankly vote for the other party, and that's what's happened.
Right. And why? I mean, why do you think are Democrats just more successful at messaging to these specific groups of people, or are they delivering on their promises?
I think it's both. I think. Let me address the first. You asked a question earlier. I think Asians. I can only speak to Asians. You know, I can't really say Hispanics or East Africans or stuff. But I would say the Asians were entrepreneurial. We have a very strong work ethic and believe in education and really bettering ourselves. Now, of course, that's a blank statement, but you know, you see it time and time again. So I think those values, especially within the Vietnamese community, Chinese community, Korean community, tilt Republican when they vote. I think Chinese and Japanese and Filipinos and Hmong tilt Democratic. But generally, I think all through across various Asian ethnicities, you have similar values. Now, with regard to your second question, I think the Democrats really have done a masterful job in messaging to minority communities, whether it's Asian, whether it's Hispanic, whether it's African American, whether it's the newly arrived East Africans, done a masterful job of messaging to these communities, and you've seen it in the vote totals. We're talking 70-30, 75-25, 80-20, sometimes 90-10. And if you're rolling up majorities like that, you're wildly successful.
You know, I've had discussions with other Republicans about the difference between the way Republicans approach their messaging and the way that the Democrats in Minnesota do it. And one big difference that I've seen and observed is that you almost have, there's more leniency within the Democratic Party to message and also pursue policies depending on the region. The Democrats in the urban core, the legislators and representatives, are much different than the Democrats in greater Minnesota. And one example is, the issue of life, abortion. There is a pro-life majority in the state Senate and the state House right now, even though the Democrats have the majority in the House and the Senate. And the reason for that is because in greater Minnesota, the Democrats are pro-life. In the urban core, the Democrats are almost all pro-choice. Whereas on the Republican side, you see the same messaging tactics in the urban core as you do in greater Minnesota. And I believe that that's one of the reasons why you see a huge inconsistency and you essentially see no Republicans getting elected in the urban core. Do you think I'm right on about that, or do you think I'm off?
I think you're right on. I think
because people are going to come after you. Republicans are going to come after you because you're pro-choice.
Well, I'm personally very pro-life. I do not, I do not believe that is an issue that really has nothing to do with my race. And quite frankly, I think it's an issue that really has nothing to do with government. And so, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Mm-hmm. So, do you think that there should be more leniency then within the party in terms of it should be okay for maybe somebody who's more socially inclusive, more socially liberal, to run with an R next to their name in the city districts, or no?
I think, well, we've seen it. Cam Whitten, mayoral candidate, this last election.
Yeah, he was on the show here too.
Yeah, he ran on a socially inclusive platform. I was a big supporter of his, and I really enjoyed intelligent, articulate spokesmen for. Look, I think these are gotcha questions. These are gotcha issues. I think most people out there today, the non-political types, and I think that's, and that's where I come from. Whether it's Republican or Democrat, we kind of want generally the same things. We want good government, good schools, a good infrastructure, a safety net for people that can't really take care of themselves, the old, the poor, the downtrodden. I think that's a good Christian message that, quite frankly, whether it's Republican or Democrat, we should all agree on. Now, what I think where we don't message well, we in the Republican Party, is, we trying to say we're pure on this issue, and if you're not with us on this issue, then we don't want you part of us. And if that's the case, and which it seems like the messaging from the party over the last 10 years, that has been the case, then quite frankly, we're not going to continue. We're not going to be winning elections in the state of Minnesota. It's that simple. If you want to, political parties only exist.
And that's what's been happening.
Well, and there you go. And political parties exist by definition to win elections. So if the Republican Party is not in the business of winning re-elections, well, quite frankly, I think there's going to be no more Republican Party in the very near future. So I think that's where we gotta look. We could say that we are conservative. We have a certain set of principles and values, and hold dear to those certain set of principles and values. Yet we should also be inclusive enough, big tent enough, to say, I disagree with that issue, but it's okay. Why don't you join our little party here, and we can agree on. President Reagan said, if you agree with me 80% of the time, you're my buddy. And I hold dear to that.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point that President Reagan made and that you brought up as well. So we're coming to the end of our show here, but I just wanted to let everyone know more about who you are. I thank you so much for coming on the show and answering all these questions. You've been on for about 50 minutes now, so But what events do we have coming up? Or is there any ways that people can get involved in your campaign?
Well, you know, so go on to our Facebook. It's
let's pop up the Facebook page here. Dennis, if you want to, or I'm sorry, Dallas, if you want to pop up his Facebook page. So if you go to facebook.com/win-with-nguyen, and that's Nguyen, you can see the URL right there. It's a good looking Facebook page that you have there. And
thank you very much.
Look at what we have down here. If we scroll down, oh, there it is. That's us.
Right. So you can go to our Facebook, you know, share, like us, find out all about us. That's the most interactive way of getting to know about the campaign.
Okay.
Go to our website, follow us on Twitter, donate to the campaign if you feel that's the message that you want to listen to. And you know, the most important thing is volunteer to be election judges in November. That's important, actually. And so those are the things we're working on. Look, I come from a business world. Spent the last 18 years of my life in the private sector. I've never run for political office before. This is the first time I'm running. You know, I come from the private equity world where, you know, we invest in companies, we grow revenues, we hire workers. I'm proud to say I've hired over 6,500 people in my life.
Wow.
Thank you. And that's the skill set we're bringing to this office. Because I think doing the same old is not going to work. We got to have some fresh ideas to reinvent state government. And the people out there need to ask themselves, is what's been working over the last 4 years, do you want that to continue? And if the answer is no, you have an alternative.
Yeah, I must say, Dennis, you being on the show is it's like a breath of fresh air. You know, we've had a lot of great guests, a lot of political guests, and you're probably the most unique guest that I've had who's running for political office, because I do get this sense from you that you're not a career politician. You're not interested in trying to create this image of this or that, and more just telling it how it is. And you know, I certainly appreciate that, and appreciate your candor and everything like that as well. So, but yeah, go on his Facebook page, facebook.com/win-with-nguyen, and you got 1,562 likes so far. You haven't bought any of those likes, have you?
It's organic.
Nice.
Moving along.
Nice. Well, sounds good. And Dennis, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
Hope you can come again.
Thank you.